This is A.T., a little out of breath. I've been walking around hauling the Choynski Chronicles by Christopher LaForce. It's really fact-filled book, which I recommend. Anyway, here are the great Jack Johnson and, in my mind, in the minds of others, the great Joe Choynski. Now, if you've watched part one, you already know the background of their famous February 1901 fight that took place in Galveston, Texas, a town that was still devastated by the worst storm in recorded U.S. history. And you know that this so-called exhibition is in fact a real prize fight, illegal in many states, including Texas. Well, now that you have the background, here's what happened. The fight occurred on a drizzly February evening, 1901, inside a packed Harmony Hall. It still lacks a roof. You can see a picture here. That's since the hurricane, all detailed in part one. And it required that a tarp be extended above the ring. The referee is Herman Bernot. He is a former Choynski opponent and, like Choynski, a boxing instructor, and I'm putting that word instructor in air quotes. It's scheduled for 20 rounds, but Joe Choynski heard from some of Jack's friends that Jack, was in top condition, so it was then that Joe decided to at least try to end things quickly. After preliminary bouts, including one featuring two fighters, each with one leg, Choynski entered the ring at 9:34. Johnson arrived 5 minutes later. The ring action that I'm going to tell you derives from newspaper reports of the day, and also Choynski's and Jack's later comments, a lot of them coming from the aforementioned book, the Choynski Chronicles. It went like this. Round one began at 9:47. There are several seconds of sparring, then Choynski throws her right hand. Jack ducks. He counters with a left. That hits Joe in the neck. Then there's a flurry in the middle of the ring from both men. Choynski throws out several left jabs. Jack is able to evade them. They clinch. Joe then throws out several more jabs, again evaded. Then, according to one newspaper account, which I'm quoting, Joe Choynski put a considerable blow onto the chin of Jack Johnson, then a right to Jack's forehead. That ended the round. The papers gave the round to Choynski. And I should mention here that in this particular period, many official decisions were registered not by judges nor by the refs, but by newspapers. Round two, not much action, except Joe did plant a straight left to Jack's nose. Both men are very cautious. The newspaper assessments were it was an even round. And at that time, Choynski agreed. But years later, he wrote these words, and I'm quoting Joe Choynski. Johnson trotted out for the second round. He began mixing with me. He should not have done this. I drove in the old sledges, battering him around the ring. Then, just to see how much or how little that he knew, I purposely dropped my guard to open him up, and he bit. But I let that pass. Again, he opened up. I still waited, but now I knew what to do. Only ring craft teaches a man about this. We have to learn it by bitter example. We now look at round three, and there is no dispute about this. Jack Johnson came out in a crouch, and he began to display his graceful footwork, and that drew applause, which is interesting given that the audience, I'm going to put this politely, was not known for throwing applause at fighters with a slightly darker skin hue. But Jack was pretty well known, and also it was reputed that he saved quite a few lives during the hurricane. Whatever, both slugged it out with both arms. Joe Choynski quickly feints with a right hand, then with a left hook, hits Jack slam on the jaw. Johnson's eyes are closed. He falls into Joe's arms, slides face first onto the floor, rolls onto his back, the referee counts him out. And he remains there until he's helped up. Now, the papers disagreed then about that punch. Several had it as a right hand, and not everybody had the right hand going at the same place. Some said Choynski hit Jack with a right to the stomach, another to the heart, another to the head. But almost everyone present agreed, and it's assumed to be true now, that it was a left hook. Johnson at the time said it was, although decades later he said he'd never been KO'd by anybody, but he had been KO'd twice, once here and another time by Jess Willard in 1915. Joe Choynski, too, said it was a left hook. But like Johnson, he contradicted himself decades later when he said it was a haymaker right hand. This is an example of the difficulty in finding out what really happened with, well, I've done videos on strongmen, how much was really lifted and how many repetitions and so on, and it's especially true with fighters. The Texas Rangers happened to be there. They're outfitted in 10-gallon hats, each one wearing a 6-shooter pistol. They came into the ring and escorted both fighters out and on to jail. One Captain Brooks said, and I'm quoting him, "You boys are going to the Crossbar Hotel." Both Joe and Jack were incarcerated, well, sort of, for 2 weeks, as the Texas governor and state's attorney sought long prison sentences at hard labor for both men for violating state and local laws. Although there's dispute regarding details, both were jailed for 2 weeks, and both gave boxing demonstrations during the day in the jail yard for visiting dignitaries and the guards and the sheriff. Both fighters were allowed out in the evenings. Joe went to a hotel. Jack went to his home. The sheriff, by the way, for several days, escorted Joe to a restaurant, and they had meals together. Jack, more than Joe, seemed to appreciate the time together, and he wrote about it this way. This is Jack Johnson. "Joe had great affection for me, and to prove it, he gave me lessons, showing me the best punches anyone has ever seen in a jail yard. I learned more in those 2 weeks than I had learned in my entire existence up to that point." Unquote, Jack Johnson. 2 weeks after the bout, a grand jury ruled that they were not guilty and both were released, and it's unknown if they ever met again. And that, in braces, is the story of Joe Choynski versus Jack Johnson. E.T. is indebted to Christopher LaForce, author of the Choynski Chronicles, and Ron J. Jackson, author of the Barge Battle of 1889. That is about Joe's famous slugfest with Jim Corbett, but the book offers good background into Choynski. This is E.T. Did you like the video? Hit the like button. If not, thumbs down. Share this video and other videos with your friends, if you will, on social media. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so. Thank you.